required by law. The municipal clerk is directed to include a statement in the minutes of this meeting. Madam Clerk, are there any review changes?
No, Mayor.
Presentation by Inspire representatives. Chief?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Of course, Jim Baca.
Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Jim.
So I know at the last work session that we attended, we reviewed the draft MOU that was presented, and there were a lot of questions and concerns about it. So I know after that we had a work session with a couple of the commissioners and the fire chief, and I think we talked about the things of concern, and they've rewritten the MOU. And we believe that the MOU would resolve all the concerns the city may have. But if it doesn't, and there's any particular topic that we can respond to, we'd be happy to address it.
Commissioners, any questions?
Yeah, one of the major concerns we had, and I thought we had already ironed this out, was that the city-owned vehicles would remain in the city and be manned to respond to emergencies in the city, and that it's no part of this MOU.
We had that discussion at the work session, and we said that we would look at it. Logistically, that was almost impossible for us to pull off. I think what the issue is that Inspira has a fleet of probably a couple dozen ambulances, and the city of Millville, only 28% of the time is there one call. The other 72% of the time, it's 2, 3, 4, and 5 deep. So it's not uncommon that Inspira has to take the ambulances that they bought and paid for to use for their interfacility work for 911 calls. So more times than not, Inspira ambulances are providing services to the city of Millville. The restriction that has always been on these two ambulances back when they were first released to Millville Rescue Squad, we put a self-imposed restriction that those ambulances purchased by the city would not be used for interfacility transports, and they weren't. They were committed just to 911 calls. I think what's dangerous is that all the surrounding communities that we serve, none of our surrounding communities have put restrictions on any of their equipment coming to Millville for us, based on the fact that it was purchased by their city taxpayers. And I think it sets a poor precedent if the city of Millville puts restrictions on equipment going outside of Millville just because it was purchased with city taxpayer funds. That's something that this body would have to decide on.
Well, it seems to me that restriction was placed on a while back, and that was never a problem. I guess it's because of the number of ambulances you probably had at your disposal. But and what other cities have paid for the ambulances, do you know?
I don't know that I follow your question.
The restriction taking, using them for only to respond for emergencies in Millville or whatever, was placed on there quite a while ago.
No, that was never on there.
It's not in the MOU.
I thought that's what, when we purchased, that's what you used to do, the Millville Rescue Squad?
Yeah, from the day that Millville Rescue Squad took possession of those and insured them, staffed them, maintained them, fueled them, from that day until now, it's always been used just for 911 responses, but it doesn't.
Not necessarily Millville.
But not necessarily
Okay.
just the geographic boundary of Millville. The one restriction, and it wasn't in the MOU, the one restriction that was self-imposed by us was that they would not be used for nursing home transports, dialysis transports, interfacility transports. They were only to be used by 911, but we don't restrict them from going to back up the city of Vineland or in mutual aid with Laurel Lake or in the Morris River Township,
Do you have the old
They've
MOU?
never been restricted from that. This would be a new restriction that I think would be setting a precedent that could be dangerous.
Chief, I think the compromise to that, and Commissioner Davis and I were at that meeting, was that we wanted a ambulance in the city at all time. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
That was the compromise that we said was doable. In fact, that is workable. That's how this fluid response strategy works, is that if Inspira, as we are here right now, in the event that Inspira has 12 ambulances staffed and activated, one of those, regardless of whether they're owned and operated by Inspira or dedicated primarily to transports, they would take priority of a 911 call, and they do often, very often. And that's how a fluid response strategy works. There's little restriction. It's the closest available ambulance, regardless of who paid for it.
How many ambulances did you used to have total when it was Millville Rescue Squad?
Well, we had 23 licensed, and I think that number has probably went up.
And how many will be on site now? Is it going to be 23 or more than 23?
Well, that's how many ambulances are licensed and capable. You don't have that many staffed all the time.
Right, but on site you had 23 ambulances,
Yes.
and how many are going to be on site now?
The same number, plus we have 3 extra Inspira
Okay,
ambulances.
so there'll be 26.
Could be,
Yeah.
could be anywhere 26 within the geographic range of regional or IMC Vineland, Millville City. There would be that many. Could
But,
definitely
but located in the Millville Rescue Squad building, you had 23 previously.
those 23 are still there.
And the 23 are going to stay there
Yes.
that were
Yes.
there. They won't be moved. So the number's going to be
Still
the
committed to the
same as
Millville
what you
station.
always
Yeah.
be housed in
Yes.
the Millville. Committed is a different word than housed in
Okay.
my brain, right?
Okay, good point.
Right. So housed in the Millville station will be
Yes.
23 because you could have 100 committed. If they're all in Woodbury, it's not going to do us any good.
Gotcha.
That's right. So okay, that's all.
One of the other
I mean-
concerns we
Well,
had
yeah.
that the chief of the fire department and the police department brought up is for our first responders. And we wanted to make sure if there was a fire call or a police emergency that we were able to have an ambulance staff to respond to those situations within the city, and we agreed upon that. Is that correct?
Well, that's never changed. I mean, we've always provided, standby service or backup service to police, fire, whenever it was requested.
Well, I know
I
the
think it's
chief,
in the
the chief
MOU.
brought up a situation where there was a fire, and it was a working fire, and he had his men and women working on the fire, and that bus that was there had to leave to somewhere else. Excuse me, which put him in a bad situation. God forbid somebody got hurt.
If there was an ambulance committed to a fire scene, and there was danger at that fire scene, that ambulance wouldn't leave. If the fire was out and they were just rolling up hose, and there was a life-threatening emergency somewhere, wouldn't we want that ambulance to get moving toward that? I mean,
Well, I just want to make sure that if it's a working fire or a police
If
shooting,
there's-
active shooting, that the
it's
Inspira bus is going to be on scene. God forbid someone gets hurt and they need to be moved out of there. Am I correct, Chief, or am
our
I?
practice has been they don't leave until they're released by the incident commander. We
Yeah,
follow the
that
incident
we have-
commander.
We did resolve that and work through that. We haven't
Okay.
had any issues since then.
Okay.
And Chief, you're okay. It says second alarm is when they'll have an ambulance. Is that what it
Well,
should
it
be? I
says-
don't know.
It says, or the hazardous atmosphere, so I think that gives me the
Authority.
discretion if it's not necessarily a second alarm as far as our box alarms are set up.
Okay.
Um,
So
I
how-
can-
how-
I can use that language there to request the ambulance.
So number 5 and number 6, the wording's okay with you.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Regina, in point number 11, where the city will voluntarily donate to Inspira an amount equal to $105,000. Is that legit? Can we do that?
Yeah, Brock, did you research that? You were going to research if we're allowed to donate to an
Well,
entity?
Inspira, when I was reading the revised MOU, Inspira is a not-for-profit organization. Is that correct? That's correct. And I'll check the statute again.
Well, it says
and
How
tax,
much did
it
we
says
do-
tax exempt. It doesn't
How-
say no.
Wait a minute before we go there. How much do we donate to the Millville Rescue Squad every year?
105.
Here 5 years ago, it was 35,000, and then so we went to, the maximum is 105, that the statute says you can get those.
Yeah.
So that's what we did.
The maximum was what, Marcy?
105.
Okay.
But that was for a volunteer service.
Exactly.
Were they a volunteer service? You're not a volunteer service.
They had volunteers, some volunteers at the time.
Yeah, we
Does
do.
Inspire still
We
have
still,
volunteers?
yeah, there is still a volunteer component through Inspira, a very strong volunteer component.
It says, I didn't understand why it says, I understand why you'll give us the budget, which, or the audit, which I like. But then it said if the donation exceeds 70,000, if we're giving you 105, it's always going to exceed
Yes.
does that leave us a door for
Well,
future commissions to give you less than the 105?
We mirrored the same, we mirrored the same.
Is that the same
language
language?
in the MOU, yes.
Okay.
I mean, in essence, I think, the transition, all the services that have been provided by Millville Rescue Squad for many years, those levels of service, the response time standards, the quality of service, it's not going to diminish. It would only improve for sure.
Well, I thought
And
the
that's
meeting
why
was
we're
very
just
positive.
emulating the same package.
I think when we left that meeting, and Brock was there also, I thought we left, it was a very positive meeting. I know everything that we brought up, and the chief, both from the fire department and police department, and also Sherman Taylor, our OEM. I thought the meeting was very positive, and when we walked out of there, I thought that we were pretty satisfied as to what we heard, what we were going to do. So I'm okay with it. And I know Commissioner Davis was there. I don't know if he wants to say anything, but
No, I won't support this MOU as written because, like you said, we agreed to have an ambulance dedicated to the city of Millville, and it's not here in writing, and I won't support this like it is.
I just have one other question. We have to do 30 days prior written notice. Who in the city is going to take care of making sure that that gets done? For any, if you need an ambulance at like the fireworks, or, I mean, will your department take care of that?
Well, we usually notify the fire department. We do.
So you'll take care of that to make sure all that gets done? Okay. So that's doable, that's not,
Those permits all come through the annual.
okay. Because I know sometimes we pass them sooner. Do we always pass them 30 days leeway? Sometimes it seems like things are closer than that.
We
So
ask for 30 days. If it's 2 weeks or a week, hey, listen.
Okay, because I was just thinking 30 days. Sometimes things are pushed through, and it's not always the case that it is a 30-day time frame.
We are committed to the city of Millville. If you need us, we'll be here.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, if I may, the statute is 40:5-2, and it authorizes a municipality, any municipality may make a voluntary contribution of not more than $70,000 annually to any duly incorporated first aid and emergency or volunteer ambulance or rescue squad association of the county, municipality, etc. So I think that's broader than just a volunteer ambulance.
But you said 70,000. We're given
Well,
105.
because there's another provision in here, and the other provision is, it says, in addition, if any such associations experience extraordinary need, the county or municipality may contribute an additional amount of not more than $35,000 annually, and then I think there is a provision in there that they would have to provide an audit. So that's where the audit requirement comes in.
But we've
So-
always given it to them up front before they, I realize you need it. I'm not fighting that. But shouldn't there be some documentation that they need it? Because we're giving it before the fact that they've proven to us that they need it.
If I
But-
recall
Go ahead,
correctly,
Marcy.
we used to give them less money, but we used to pay for their gasoline.
Correct.
So then we decided to
Yes.
just do away with that and just
Right.
give them 105,000.
Initially, the amount that you were allowed to give was 70,000. You could give an additional 35,000 if they showed the need for it. But at one point in time, there's no limit, as the statute will say, there is no limit to in-kind services. And at one point in time, Mobile Rescue Squad's in-kind services was the building on Columbia Avenue, all the utilities with it, the phone, fuel. So when we built our own building and we started incurring our own utility expenses and costs and turned that property back over to the city, then and we also stopped using city fuel, all those in-kind services went away. We were probably at one point in time getting the equivalent of maybe $100,000 to $150,000 of in-kind services. That went away. When that went away, the cash stipend went up to 105.
And I'm not saying good or bad for that, but shouldn't there be some kind of documentation if we're giving them the extra 35 that they need it versus just giving it to them, just so all our ducks are in a row?
In the past, that's been quantified by the substantial increase of charity work that we do for uninsured, underinsured patients in Millville. Millville Rescue Squad probably writes off, I'm just going to say, hundreds of thousands of dollars for sure that are uncollectible for patients that we take that have no means of reimbursement.
Marcy, do you have documentation to that in the record when you issue the additional money, or no?
Well, I think you can almost take notice of that is the case, that
So
insurance
just say
doesn't
okay.
cover
Okay.
most of the services that are provided by a rescue squad. I mean, it just
I mean-
doesn't, so.
I mean, to summarize, I would have to say this. The city of Millville has had a unique model for many, many years where the city of Millville has received good quality, timely, professional service for a very, very modest subsidy. And at this juncture, I applaud Inspira for agreeing to come on board and providing that same model, that same level of quality service for the same very modest stipend. I applaud them for that.
So what sentence is it, Commissioner Davis, that you want in there that would make you feel comfortable?
Oh, we had our meeting on the 29th of August. We agreed that there would be an ambulance available for service in Millville, an ambulance that we purchased, and it's hasn't been added.
I mean, I don't have a problem if it's not our ambulance, as long as there's an ambulance. I mean, is our ambulance that much better than a different ambulance?
Well, I don't know,
mean,
but since August 16th, the day they took over, I've been informed of 2 calls where they were substantially less because there was no ambulance available.
Okay.
There were several calls made. In one instance, there was a mutual aid issue. In another instance, I'm not sure what the issue was, but there was no ambulance available. One of them was as long as 40 minutes. One of them was 17 minutes.
I guess that brings me to a question. You said you would have 26 ambulances available rather than 23, but how much bigger is the geographical area?
It's not, it's the same geographic area.
It's just Millville.
Yes. And Commissioner, with all due respect, if we're 4 deep into a call and the 40-minute call was the 5th or 6th call in line, we can street as many vehicles and crews as we can, but at some point, they're gonna be saturated. Just like the police department, just like the fire department, just like any other department, once you get to a saturation point, something's gonna have to give. So,
And-
I'd like to, if you could forward those incidents to me, or would you let me know so I can research them, I'd appreciate that.
I mean, nothing's going to be 100%. I mean, nationwide, the standard is to have these good response times 90% of the time. With the model that Millville Rescue Squad had in the year of 2016, the end of the year report demonstrated that both for the life threats and the non-life threats, it was a 90% response time, that they met the 90% response time. So far, for this year, from January 1st up until yesterday, we're at 93% compliance for the first call and 91% for the second call deep. That's incredible. I mean, when you go 3, 4, 5, and 6 deep, the other night we were 6 calls deep, and probably, Mr. Davis, the calls where, there was a delayed response, we probably were 3, 4, 5, 6 deep. And no system, urban, metropolitan, rural, can account for that unless you just spend millions of dollars having resources available, to go that deep. You can't staff for what the probability is going to be. You have to staff for what the possibilities or the possibility is going to be. It's or the real stat. What's likely. It's likely that we're going to be 1, 2, 3 deep, but 4, 5, and 6 is it's going to happen. There's going to be, and that's why we have mutual aid. And what would be somewhat frightening would be if the city of Millville started putting restrictions on city equipment going out of the city of Millville, and then our neighbors did the same thing for us. Who would come in when we're 3, 4, 5, and 6 deep if they put the same restriction?
You spoiled us, I think, and we're kind of expecting the same thing. Over the years, the rescue squad it's been great, so we want to, we're just cautious to keep it that way.
Is the staffing, you mentioned the number of ambulances the same, is the staffing staying the same? So I don't know how many you have on a shift. Is that number staying the same, or is that changing?
Nothing has changed. I mean, just except for, say, essentially a name change on the vehicles, nothing has changed.
So your model, if there's 10 on a shift, it's still going to be 10 on a shift, so
I
the service, in theory, should not change.
I can attest, since I was previous Millville Rescue Squad and now I'm an Inspira employee. The only thing that has really changed since the merger acquisition is the uniform that I wear and the sign out in front of the building and the lettering on the side of the truck. That is the only thing that's changed.
How
And
did
I
you,
don't have my expedition anymore.
how'd you change them all so quick? I was kind of amazed that the names on the side
They're-
all changed so quickly. I mean, you did that
Inspira's
really.
a well-oiled machine, and you know they made it happen.
Chief Lippincott?
John, maybe you could explain a little bit, it's just because I know this question's come up before, just before you leave, and I don't want it to come up later, no,
Sure.
we're asking. I know you're talking about mutual aid, but you also have contracts, so can you explain that, we do mutual aid with the fire department, but we don't have contracts where we provide fire service for a fee.
Right.
Just make sure the commissioners
Right.
understand, sometimes when those ambulances leave Millville, it's for a contract that you have, it's not mutual aid. There is a difference, and I know
Well-
that came up before, and I want to make sure that got clear.
Sure.
That air got clear here tonight.
I mean, the easiest way to address that is that, for example, Mike, if the fire department responds to one of our neighboring communities with the equipment purchased by city taxpayers and the paid staffing that we're paying for, there is no cash exchange. What he's referring to as a contract simply says that when Inspira sends this equipment in there, there is some subsidy to it. There is some exchange. It's a modest subsidy, so it's a win-win for everybody. I mean, it helps offset. I mean, you know, what little bit of subsidy is provided by some of our neighbors in order to get the service is actually helps offset the overall cost of the operation so that the city of Millville can still experience a very affordable, low-cost system.
And to build on top of that, if we didn't have the contracts, and a neighboring community said, we're not gonna have a contract, it's gonna be what it is, we would be sent mutual aid there anyhow. You know, they would say, hey, we need an ambulance, we can't get out, send the next due is Millville. So we would be going to that call anyhow down the road.
Right, so good point.
Any other questions?
I mean, if they put a sentence in that there will be an ambulance in Millville, is that satisfactory to you?
But there just hasn't been.
Well, if,
I know that there hasn't been. I happened to be there for one of the calls.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take. We thought we ironed this out face to face in a meeting with both these guys, and apparently they weren't listening to how I was listening. Yeah, it was something that we agreed to, and it's not here. I'm not supporting it either way. This one.
Well, I'm just curious what alternative is there?
That would be, yeah.
I mean, if you can assure us that there'll be an ambulance there,
Right.
I realize that if there were so many emergencies on one day, what do you do? Say, I'm sorry, we can't go save you, because I mean, it's a hard place to be in, right?
If I can, I don't want to compare it to the police department or the fire. We can. It's almost like the term that they need to use is stacking calls. You got calls that come in, and you respond to them as to the emergency of the
Correct.
call. If, someone sprayed their ankle, but you have somebody having a heart attack, that's where you want to go to. So I think that's where you need to elaborate a little bit more, Chief, so that we all can understand that these calls are prioritized. And sometimes if that call isn't a priority call, you're going to go to where the motor vehicle accident is with
Right,
people that are
it's-
trapped. So,
It's called
stack
priority
calls,
dispatching, and I mean, what your concern is, I mean, that's a nationwide concern. I mean, the utilization of EMS services nationwide has been increasing exponentially, and there's a high increase in non-life-threatening, low-priority calls that are keeping the resources tied up for that emergency call. So every city across the nation who has a system that wants to provide service to in a prompt way, they have to use priority dispatch. There's no way that you can have you can't predict that. You'd have to spend so many millions of dollars to have ambulances sitting by, standing, waiting for that call. We can't control our peak demand influx. No city can control their peak demand influx, and I can assure you that every time there's a delayed response or no available unit from Millville, it's during, a peak demand influx. And that's why you have mutual aid. That's why you priority dispatch. You have to have a system that gives a high level of certainty that the priority call, the life threat, the heart attack, the pedestrian struck by a vehicle, something of immediate life threat, you have to have some sort of system that assures that they're going to get the timely response. And unfortunately, there may be a 15-minute wait for the sprained wrist or the person that's had a fever for a week and the doc said go up to the ER. You have to prioritize them. We do that. I mean, we try our best, but there's no way that we can guarantee. I mean, we can. I think the only way that I could stand here and make Mr. Davis's guarantee that there will always be an ambulance available for Millville would be is if the city can afford to subsidize it to the tune of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
The other comment I would make is that we're thinking in terms of the geographical limits of the city, but if one of us had a bad accident and we happened to be on the Morris River side of the border on 55, I think we would want the Millville Rescue Squad to come and get us out of a car if we were trapped, and we could be a resident of the city of Millville and be in that area. So, and I think you do respond to those calls as well. In fact, I know the police department responds to those kinds of calls all the time where there's an emergency.
Anybody else?
Anything I just say, everything I just want to add, just so, because like I said, hopefully this is the last time we have to discuss it and get everything clear. And I don't want to throw out that ugly word of Facebook, but it's out there. And I don't want to speak for the commissioner, but I know what some of the concerns that you hear from people is they get 3 or 4 calls deep, but that first call, that Millville ambulance is going to the township. And then the second call comes in Millville, and I hear what they're saying, they've got a system in place. But I just want to make sure all those questions are answered, so when we walk away today, tonight,
Good point.
how come we didn't discuss that, or guaranteed someone's going to come to the commission meeting and didn't come to the work session, and they're going to ask those questions. We're going to be like, these guys are gone, we need to get these answers. So I know that some people struggle with, well, we bought this ambulance, call comes in, it goes to Morris River Township. Now, there's a call in Millville, it's a second call or third call, and there's maybe a slight delay or mutual aid has to come in. And people may say, well, how come the ambulance, the Millville ambulance, is down in the township, and I get an ambulance from mine? So, and I think they've already explained that, but again, if we could just rehash that one more time, so if that question does come up, later on or another time, it's been cleared, it's been aired, it's been addressed, and we're all.
I mean, that same question comes, emergency services across the board. I mean, that same question would be asked is, what if the primary fire crew that's on staff has Millville fire truck committed to a 2 or 3 hour fire over the border, whether it's in Vining or Deerfield Township or whatever, and another fire call comes in Millville. There's a contingency plan for that, right, Mike? We have a contingency plan for that too. So yes, there's the possibility that any emergency equipment, and in their case, staffing, police, fire, could have the primary equipment and staffing that the taxpayers of this town are paying for committed to something not in the geographic boundaries of Millville. And who takes that next call? The contingency, the mutual aid plan that you have in place. Same thing here. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, statistically, so far this year, 2017, as of yesterday, in Spirit and Millville have been dispatched close to 4,000 times, and it's less than 100 times that we've responded primarily outside of the city boundaries. It's nominal. And could it happen? Yes. Could it happen? Is there a contingency plan? Yes. There's a mutual aid plan with our surrounding communities, a well-structured mutual aid plan. Vineland came in the other night. We were 6 deep. I think we had 2 gunshot victims, a motor vehicle crash, Wade in Maine, accident on Carmel Road, medical emergency on Foundry Street. I don't even know how deep we were. I went to the Carmel Road wreck. But Vineland had to come in. That's why we have mutual aid. Vineland come in and took a patient. That's going to happen.
Sherman, you want to say something?
I have to agree with the statement he just made. 30 years I've been in this system. Started the
you have no idea what call is gonna come in at what time.
Right.
The first call that our ambulance could go on is the toothache or the stub toe, and then the tones hit, the tones hit, the tones hit, the tones hit. The gentleman sitting over there knows, the chief knows, this chief knows. The next 5 calls could be accident when entrapment, cardiac arrest, double pregnancy, all those. And you don't know what is going to happen at what time. The city of Millville, for the 30 years that I've been involved, has been a good neighbor, mutual aid community with our surrounding communities. We've gone as far as Wildwood. We've gone as far as, down to the shore, a lot of towns for things. Police department's done that. The fire department's done that. The ambulance have done that. You can't guarantee what your call's going to be at what point in time. I would hate to see, I wouldn't want to get into the business of us not using the ambulance, that's our city ambulance first in line, and getting a call in Marsh or Township and having Vineland have to go through Millville to get to that call. It's just not a good practice to get into. We've always been a good mutual aid neighbor. I think we should keep it that way. Language is language, and I understand that, but, and I don't always agree with the chief, he knows that, but I have to agree that you're not gonna be able to guarantee that that first ambulance won't be used for the cardiac arrest or something else out of district that needs it. I would like to see, as a taxpayer, I would like to see it stationary, but as a 30-year man, I know that that's probably almost impossible to do it. I agree with it, and I understand it. I understand both sides. So I don't know if that helps, but I think we should keep that good. We have mutual aid agreements with every municipality in the Cumberland County area, and we've even been called to other counties. So I think we should keep that process in line. I think we should continue to be that good neighbor.
Thank you.
You have 26 ambulances, but how many stay for emergencies? Because the others are doing transport, I'm assuming, correct?
No, it's
I just wonder how
It's-
logistically you
yeah,
figure it out.
there's no simple way to describe what's known in our industry as a fluid response strategy, but under a fluid response strategy, any ambulance that Inspira has licensed or staffed, whether it's known as a primary interfacility transport vehicle or not, is capable and equipped to take 911 calls. So at any given time, that's once again going to fall into the peak demand influx. In the event that there's 15 ambulances staffed at any given time and 10 of them are available, we're going to go 10 deep. We're going to look like heroes. But if there's a patient on board, if there's 15 ambulances staffed, and 13 of them are on a dialysis run or an interfacility, and they have a patient on board, they're not available, then there may only be 2. So there's no way to say for sure with certainty how many would be available. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. I mean, the real key here, and the MOU does have a monitoring component in there to monitor performance. And the performance is in the results. What is the response time standard? What % of the time do you make that call in the established time period? And monitor that. And if that falters, if the system falters and all of a sudden that percentage is going too low, then Jim and his team sit down and look at it and say, what do we need to do to fix that? How do we improve that response time standard?
Well, there's never a time where you have 23 ambulances and 23 doing, you never do that, correct?
Never.
To answer the commissioner's question, right now today at what time, so it's 4:30, we should have 8 BLS ambulances on the road, 3 critical care trucks on the road that can handle any call within the geographic area if needed.
But at this very moment, we don't know if
Right,
there's a
but you
patient
don't
on
know.
board.
Like, you might have the 3 SCQ trucks might be busy, 2 of the BLS trucks, we might have 5 available, and that's not including the EMS truck. That's just strictly for EMS.
the backup, that's the fluid response chief's on.
Is that the daily thing, 7 days a week, or 5 days a
No,
week?
some days are, Sunday is less staffing,
Okay.
nighttime is less staffing. You know, I mean, and in order to meet, you know, the economic requirements of staying afloat, you have to try to staff to meet your demand.
Mhm.
You know, and our team is constantly monitoring the demand, and that demand changes. And when that demand changes, we may move shifts. We may identify that the peak demand moved to a later period of the shift, and that shift gets moved and changed. It's you know, every 6 weeks we're looking at that.
Now, general question, but if we do experience problems, I'm sure you're willing to sit down with us and work them out, whatever they may be.
Absolutely.
I mean,
It's absolutely.
I mean, I shouldn't have to say that, but I just want to.
Right. And that's never changed from day one.
The chief had some.
I'd love to see a dedicated truck just for Millville. I struggle that we don't have one, but I hear what they're saying too, and I understand how their system works, and maybe that's not feasible, maybe. But I like what the chief said, was maybe what we need to do is we've got that in the MOU about the response times.
Right.
And as much as, like I said, I struggle with, it's not gonna be a dedicated truck for Millville, maybe we hang our hat on, we got the response times. That's where we look at it, and we're gonna monitor that, the MOU has that agreement in there. And then I've been go to these guys a long time, hey, if we're not getting the response times that we want, not mean to stare, then we meet with them and we talk about it. Maybe at that point we say, look, you know, we need to revisit this dedicated truck or whatever, but in order to keep this
When-
process moving forward, maybe, you know, that's a compromise we have to make. I know, obviously, it's ultimately up to you. I was the one that, when we had our meeting, we talked about it, I brought it up, I said, I'd like to see, Sherman did too, I'd like to see a dedicated EMS truck just for the city. Maybe that's not, you know, I'm not an EMS expert, they are, that's why they're here. So they're telling us that that's not feasible, the system works. Got that clause in there about the response times.
Uh,
Maybe that's our safety.
How
right
often do
there.
you calculate your response times? Do you do it monthly? Do you do it, what do you do? Quarterly? How often do you?
We do like a monthly
I
report.
think it's monthly report, yeah.
So can you send the commission a report, not maybe every month, but maybe once a quarter, once every 6 months?
Yeah,
So we can,
absolutely.
then it's easy.
I can't speak for Jim, but I'm
Yeah,
sure it's
the
doing.
MOU actually sets up that
It just
I
says,
would serve that role for the city, they could funnel all the reports through me, and then I would report along with my fire
Yeah,
report
just-
once a month to the city on.
yeah, because it just says that that you're going to do that. It doesn't say anything about when we get the report. So we just got to report periodically. That way we can monitor it, and then if everything's
What-
going smoothly, great.
One of the public relation dilemmas that I've personally struggled with for many years, several times, and I'm sure that all of you have or will in the future, is that even though statistically we'll have a phenomenal record, we're 93% of the time we're making that response time. But what's going to happen is at least one call in that 7% is going to be at the midget football game where there's 100 parents, and it's going to take
Well, that's where
10
your his-
minutes, which
that-
turns into 25.
But-
10 seems like
Chief,
25.
that's where your history
And
comes
then-
into play, and you go back to your records like you're doing right now, and you give us the records of
And
what
it's
you have.
happened many
That's
times.
gonna happen.
It is going to happen.
gonna
It's
happen.
happened. It's, you know, it's frustrating to me because we're so proud of the accomplishment of making good response times in that one call
Sure,
that was high profile in a public event. You know,
we understand.
it's going to
But-
happen, and you ladies and gentlemen are going to have it too.
But that
But then
way,
you contact us and we'll have an explanation. We were 5 deep, we were 3 deep. We had a priority call. This took low priority. You know, we're going to have an answer for it.
but our due diligence has to be to monitor the 90%. So if you could forward to
That-
chief, then we
yes.
would have them. Okay.
That, you know, I mean, that is the proof whether any system is effective or not effective. It's the percentage of time that you make the established response time standard.
So we hope we see 95 and 96 in the future.
Could happen. I'll hold back from saying that. Could happen.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Now move to public comments on the agenda items only. Anyone that would like to speak about an agenda item, please step up to the mic. Limit your time to 5 minutes, please.
Brock, do we have to add a sentence in the MOU that they'll send reports to the fire chief, or that'll just be an honor system?
I think there's language in there that,
It's just honors, yeah,
that
I mean, I
think,
trust him to do
covers
it.
that. Are you satisfied with the language that's in the latest revision of the MOU, or do you think there
As
needs
far
to?
as the reporting?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll just be
Yeah.
honor system, we should be fine.
I
Okay.
think so.
I don't think it's just an honor set. I think there is an
No, there's
obligation.
specific
There's not-
requirements, and it even spells out,
Yeah.
like how many calls mutual aid had to come in for, response times.
So you have a full report?
Breakdown of calls.
Yeah.
And then, I'll forward that to the commission, just like I do the fire report.
Excellent.
I just thought it was probably good to have someone who monitor that, instead of just the report
Oh,
coming. to
there
the
it is,
commissioners.
okay.
Excellent.
I can funnel through it and look at the numbers, and then tell you if I see anything that needs your attention or not.
Appreciate it, Chief, thank you. Okay.
Good afternoon, Kirk Hewitt, Millville. I want to start off by probably right now, to be honest with you, you've got more people right now complaining on social media because they wanted to see this presentation by MRS and Inspira. The YouTube broadcast is not up and happening. So hopefully that didn't take part of my time. I came here prepared with a statement. I think probably
Right.
the commissioners all have it. A statement that I
Yes, we
Okay,
have it,
Chief.
for yeah.
Okay, please, if you'll allow me to read it, Chief has one also, because a few things have changed since listening. First off, let me start out by saying I'm not here to discuss or complain about the purchase of the rescue squad by Inspire. I'm here to offer my thoughts and my concerns about emergency services for my family and residents of Millville. Let me start by saying that Mr. Redden and the team that he built over many years have, as far as I can see, and has always been there for residents of Millville. I can't remember any times that this commission or others have had to listen to and answer questions about 911 emergency services in Millville. That said, here we are. Inspira owns the squad. People are troubled and worried. My main worry is if I need to call 911, will there be a unit available for quick response? Or will the 911 call center have to make a call for a squad outside the area, thus adding to response time? Personally, I have always felt a sense of confidence that the rescue squad is only 1.5 miles from my house if needed. That now seems to have gone away since the switch to Inspire. I pass the station at least 4 times a day. I have never seen the parking lot so empty as it's been recently. Is downsizing taking place? In the case of emergency services, I sure hope the answer is no. Here are some examples of what I have seen since the change to Inspire. At the beginning of Play Streets this summer, there was a squad there, just in case they were needed. Then week 3 of 7, no more squad. No squad for any of the rest of the weeks. At the annual Millville Car Show, there was always, as long as I can remember, a squad present at the show. This year's car show, no squad. 911 emergency calls are heard on scanners. When we hear Station 98 dispatch for a cardiac emergency, I use that as that is likely what I would need them for with my cardiac history. And 15 to 20 minutes later, Squad 13 in Laurel Lake is dispatched due to Squad 98 not responding. This example I just stated happened recently. I ask, is this acceptable? If a squad is busy on calls, I would think the 911 call center would be aware and dispatch the closest available unit via mutual aid. Yet it seems there were 3 Inspire squads in Atlantic City this past Sunday for the triathlon. I'm sorry, but this is a worry for me. There are 2 units that the city paid for at the station. Where are they going to be used? Correct me if I'm wrong, but the MOU and contract with MRS, a former commission had, is very vague, as are a lot of contracts from the past. It does state that 2 rigs purchased by city cannot leave the city for other use. With some searching and questioning, it seems that a past commission had a stacked contract in place. Basically allowed for money, fuel, and other perks that benefited MRS. In the second year of this current commission, it seems that the fuel payments, some special perks, along with the amount that the city spent, were revisited and were either removed or lowered. Thank you for that. Today, I respectfully ask that the representatives of Inspira and the commissioners make every effort possible to put forth a detailed and specific MOU and contract, including specifics such as expected response times. 10 minutes is long in a life and death emergency. The specific use and manning of dedicated city rigs, specific reporting pertaining to calls within the city of Millville for release to the public. While I realize the city commissioners cannot influence the way Inspire operates as a transport business, the commission can ensure the residents of Millville that the best emergency services are available, even if that means having to seek ways to bring emergency medical services back into the operation of the city. I ask that a specific and thorough MOU be agreed upon by both the city and Inspire that best serves the needs of the residents, then presented at the earliest possible commission meeting for public review and comment. While it may seem that my thoughts and comments are self-serving, which in a way they are, I do put my grandson and my wife ahead of others. That said, I believe and will tell you we have a great fire department and yes, police department, and just want the best possible emergency service along with the police and fire for my family and residents of Millville. Thank you. And now, if I could please, the chief answered some of the questions on here. He answered the stipend going away for fuel when they moved into their own building and all. I sat there questioning. There seems to be questions from a commissioner that he doesn't seem to be totally settled. There's still questions in my mind. Believe me, there's questions out there in a lot of people's minds. And like I say, you watch the YouTube video and you can see how many people are watching that presentation. Usually there's 2, 3, maybe 4. Today they are stacked out there wanting to see this presentation because probably Inspire is not going to be here this evening for the commission meeting because it's not on the agenda. But people have questions, people have worries. And like I say, we've never had to come here and question the chief. Commissioner Suey said it the best. Maybe we are spoiled, but you know what? If we got spoiled, this is a case where we need to stay spoiled because we do have good service here. We do. It just scares me the fact why are personnel? They're not walking to work. Their vehicles aren't there during the day. You go by there right now and you got vehicles in the parking lot, the amount of what they are when I leave here tonight at 9 o'clock to go home because naturally their staffing is down. Looks like their staffing is down now. It's troublesome. An MOU is an MOU. A contract is a contract. Am I correct in thinking that an MOU basically lots of times has easy ins or outs for both parties? That's scary. That's scary. That's all I've got. I thank you for allowing me my time and
Thank you.
hope you take it into consideration.
Chief Redden, you said staffing hadn't changed, correct? We asked you that question.
Correct, yes. I mean, just to respond to a couple of things. Yeah, during, I guess the event that's held at First United Methodist, what was it called, the program with the kids?
Place.
Place Street.
We were only requested there one time when it was Emergency Services Day. And we weren't we don't self-dispatch. We weren't requested to go there and stand by. If we were, we would have made every effort to.
There was squads there last year, almost every week, if I remember correctly. I ran all last year.
Yeah, then we were requested to be there every week. We only.
We need to really find out.
Yeah, we weren't requested for that. And The same thing, what was the other stand?
Car
values?
show, the car show he mentioned also.
Yeah, we weren't requested at the car show. Usually at the car show, we'll send a bike team. We'll send 2 EMTs with a bike because they can get up and down High Street. We weren't requested for that. So as soon as we get the request, we put it. We were requested, I think, for there's an event at Union Lake coming up, some sort of swim for veterans, kayak. We were requested for that, and we have that scheduled. So we do respond. We haven't changed that.
Again, like I said, I'm not here complaining that.
No, I understand. It's a fair question, and I see the perception.
You spoiled us. You did.
I-
You were the mayor.
I see the perception, but no, we weren't requested that, or we would have.
We're seeing so much. I think it's going to be a rush. It's going to be a rush.
It is. It's going to be under close watch.
Decision that's not proper.
It's going to be watched by many eyes, I'm sure, and I think I'm confident that we're going to meet the expectations. I think as far as the downside, there has not been any downsizing. They've been interviewing, we've been hiring. Jim, I don't know how many. I know we've hired a lot of nurses, a lot of EMTs. We haven't downsized. Whatever you're seeing in the parking lot, what that could be is the training center, which accommodates up to 100 people. That's a very busy center. If there's a class going on, that could bring 30 or 40 more cars. So there could be times that you go by and it looks like the parking lot's full. It's probably a big event going or a large training class going on in the training center. But as far as employees, most of them park in the back, and unless they're carpooling, we haven't downsized.
There has been absolutely zero change from August 15th to September 6th. Nothing. There has been no change. There's been no change in staffing, no change in scheduling. Everybody who was there is still there unless they chose not to be.
Could I may be overstepping my bounds, but could I ask you a question relating back to the first time that you and Chief came to the meeting? I think we're going back 3 meetings ago. And myself and another resident was sitting here, we mentioned the possibility of bidding out for service. And you made a comment from back there that nobody would bid for Millville service. I remember it clearly.
What I said was it's going to be very difficult to get a bid for the service.
Yes.
Well, I said Bell Plain would, and you said no, you wouldn't.
I don't know about that.
Could you honestly?
Can you step up to the mic because she can't get your voice?
Sure.
Thank you.
With what I was talking about with the remark, and it was taken by, there was a good group of people there that day, that it was a little bit snide, that Bell Plain would never bid on Millville services. Can you honestly tell me right now that when Inspira, I realize you're not Inspira, you're a representative, but when Inspira is done with the acquisition, well, the acquisition is basically done, you got to get things together for the city.
We have no internet access.
I've sort of, in my searching and asking questions, come to find that maybe a very good possibility that Bell Plain is next. So that would eliminate them from ever being able to bid on services here, to be taken under the Inspire umbrella. That's just a question that's out there.
Right. So here's what I want you to understand. I can't just go to a town or go to a service and say, hey, I want you. Somebody has to come to me and say, hey, listen, we're having difficulty meeting on me, we're having difficulty with this, can you help us? I just can't go and take somebody over.
And that I understand.
So,
Right.
So if Bell Plain came to me and said, hey, listen, we're having difficulties, can you help us? Will you help us? Then we sit down and have a conversation.
I'm waiting.
But,
See, we just look at what we see and what we hear. And it's not like somebody else heard that comment 3 weeks ago that you made standing at that chair. Yeah, I heard it.
All right, Kurt, here's what we're going to do. Obviously, we're not going to settle this tonight. We understand what you're saying. We understand what you're saying. I think we're just going to continue to beat this. So now you know where he stands. You can research it and maybe come back to the next meeting and give us some answers or send us some information.
And I do appreciate it. I'm not here to tear apart. I'm here for us. I'm here for us, you know.
I think we understand that, Kurt. I don't think you're here to beat anybody up. No.
Thank you very
You
much.
just want to be heard. Thank you.
Mayor, by the way, it's an internet connection problem. I don't want to reboot the computer now, because if we reboot it now, then we're going to lose the recording of the meeting. So at least we'll have the recording, and then we can try to reboot it in between meetings
Okay.
and see what happens.
Anyone else on the rescue squad or should I say Inspira? Seeing no one else, I close the public part or on the agenda. Discussion of commissioners. Commissioner Davis.
Not at this time, Mayor.
Commissioner Sui.
Engineers report, please.
Thank you, Commissioner, for allowing us to give us a report. I know you were tired of hearing from me and Brian all the time, so I brought Michelle with me to kind of have a happy, smiling face. So, Michelle, your first report. I'll help you if I can, but you know the material better than I do. So.
Let's hope. So I guess back on the rescue squad topic, this is the former rescue squad demolition project. Hopefully, good news. I have a packet here. I did have a PowerPoint, but if you want to flip through with me, if not, I'm just going to run through it. Should be short and sweet. So a few things just to preface. We had our initial bid date and scope of work ready to go for Thursday, September 14th. That scope of work included above ground facilities being removed, existing foundations from like the 1930s when it was first built, that whole property to be demoed and removed, any underground vaults, abandoned pipe, unforeseen utilities, air ducts of that nature, they were going to be removed. Obviously, regrading of that site. The existing trailer shed, that was going to get out of there, as well as some inlet protection for the road and site. So if we flip to the next page, this is a initial demo plan set that we have. Not too much is changing on here. There's some tiny details that are going to be added. We'll discuss them on the next slide. This is just for you guys to see. So the first addendum that we're doing is the bid date change. So we have pushed that 28 days forward to October 12th. So that's about a month that we're going to send out this and have the bids come back. Addendum 2, next page, is the clarification and the change of scope of work. So the blue italicized are the changes that we're making. So we're still doing the demolition of existing above ground facilities. However, they're only to include from the top of slab upwards of the actual building itself. The next bullet is the removal of hydraulic lift system. So that was used prior to for fleet and I believe rescue squad. I'm not too familiar. I think I was like 2 at the time. So I'm a little unsure of which side did what. But there are hydraulic lifts that are underground. I believe there are 2 pumps that come up, 2 pistons that come up, lift up the vehicle. So those inner workings are underground. And they have been advised to be removed before demolition. So saw cut the concrete slab only in that section and remove them safely. We're assuming that when existing tanks got removed, the lines were bled, so there's no oil, and we don't want anybody just busting through or rattling the site and having oil spill, and then we have an environmental issue. So if those get those workings get taken out before demo, we should be in the clear. The asbestos survey and testing for the roof and any pipe wraps that may be out there, they will be completed by the contractor, so it's their responsibility to take care of that. Testing and surveying, that's to be done before the hydraulic lift system even comes out, like first thing. So we would require their lab testings, their plans for dumping, removal. We require their receipts, however asbestos is handled. We want documentation, and then and only then can you continue with your wrecking ball. The same filling and grading of underground demolition and voids that are made. Inlet protection is getting changed. We're using filter fabric for the roads, so we're not using box inlet protection, so no cars hit them on the roadways. The shed's still getting out of there, and 2 more changes. The removal of asphalt paving. There is a deed restricted area where there were 2 tanks, a 500 and a 1,000 gallon tank outside on the Columbia side of the building. Those have been removed, and there has been a deed restricted area with like monitoring wells in there We are not to touch that asphalt. That's used as basically a capping. There's I think it kind of, on the next page it shows you, it kind of laps over concrete and asphalt. So no concrete's getting touched aside from the hydraulic lift removal. So that concrete that's in that deed restricted area, which we're still working on coordinates and exact square footage, nothing's getting touched concrete wise. The little bit of asphalt may butt up to that deed restricted area, so we're going to leave that area alone of asphalt. Usually it's like a capping system, so there's impervious over top of that soil, so there's no leaching further.
And
If we open that up.
And there's concerns that there may be pollution underneath too, correct? And if we take the cap off, then
Yeah, that's why the concrete slab we're aiming to keep there, except for the hydraulic lift, because we don't know what's in those lines. So we're in talks with the environmental specialists and LSRP to have their advice. They told us we should just take those hydraulic lifts out first and just not even deal with the issue. They are, however, unregulated, so we kind of have a little freedom with that, but the moral thing to do is to make sure we don't have oil just slopping everywhere, whether it's a gallon or a pint. And then finally, obviously, the existing plans will be revised to reflect all these changes. If you flip to the next page, this is the areas of concerns. So the hydraulic lifts are circled, and the deed restriction area are around those two back tanks, E002 and E001. So just for a graphical representation of where everything's at. If you have any questions, let me know. I can try to field them the best I can.
Michelle, are we
Yes.
going to do the hydraulic lift removal in-house, or is that going to be another project, or, I mean, I have no idea the cost, or,
Right now, we're thinking it's going to be part of this bid, and we're require them that the contractors do that first. So
Okay,
the
so it'll still be part of
asbestos
the bid, okay.
testing, surveying, lab results, hydraulic lift, and then
How many days to complete this, do you know?
how many days?
Yeah.
Not entirely sure, to be honest. I'm not sure.
we won't have an idea of that till they,
Contractor.
yeah, till the
Till the contract.
yeah,
Yeah,
And you're going to remove the asphalt of the whole parking lot? Do we
No.
have? Okay.
part of it.
part of it, yeah.
So then we'll still have the agreement with the county to park their vehicles there?
And
That'll
that's off
stay
to the left,
intact?
even if it's not asphalt, they could still park there,
So they'll still be parking?
for now, anyway.
I think they pay to do that, don't they? I think, do they pay?
I didn't think they paid, but maybe
So
they
it's a
do.
shared,
I can't remember.
You're talking about
Okay.
the asphalt in the front and also in the back?
Mainly the front. I think there's some in the back that we are
Right.
thinking about taking out, but mainly the front, just to get it kind of cleared out and not so brownfield and ugly out there
You're
where it
talking
is
about the
now.
Buck Street side, right?
The Brandrift, yeah.
Oh, Brandon from the other side,
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
and I guess it's limited because of the environmental concerns, what it can ever be used for.
Yes, yes,
Deed restrictions, yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, the whole lot, it could never
Yeah,
be a
want the-
house, or it can't be, not that you want that there. Okay.
Yeah.
Well explained, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good job, Michelle.
Thanks. Not too bad.
Today, Commissioners, we had our monthly construction progress meeting. I wanted to let you know that we reached a major milestone in the Phase 2 upgrade project. Tomorrow morning at 5 a.m., we're taking the RAS pump station out of service for approximately 2 months. We're starting a bypass at 5 o'clock in the morning. This will allow us to replace the pumps in the RAS building, connect piping, rebuild the meter vaults and all those things. So that's tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., so it's a major milestone in the project. You have the agenda from the meeting today. I'll just go through some of our progress to date. Most of the progress this past month has been on the North Secondary Clarifier. Worth Construction has had an accelerated replacement schedule for the mechanical equipment. That's all in. There's some final testing to be done by the manufacturer, true plane, alignments, things of that nature. Installation of the weirs, baffle walls. The coating was completed yesterday. The Sewer Guard 210X epoxy coating was done. That tank is pretty much going to be ready to go online, but unfortunately it's not going to be able to be put back into service until the RAS building is completed. Yesterday we started the disc filter foundation construction. That's on top of the old chlorine contact tanks. We did hit the old chlorine contact tank, so it was a wise choice to get up out of the ground as fast as we could. If I remember correctly, we hit the the chlorine contact tanks in the beginning of the work on the Trojan UV, and it cost us $42,000 in a change order to saw cut concrete. That's the reason we came up out of the ground quicker, to not get into a position like that again. But we did hit the old tank. It was about 18 inches below grade. So we would have been saw cutting through concrete, and it would have been very costly, probably double the amount we already spent. There's been a lot of work on the south secondary clarifier as well, electrical, lighting on the bridges. The SCADA communication for the Avivo controls has been tied in now. On the solids handling building, the doors have been put into the building, the two-man doors, paving restoration completed at the retaining wall, and a 10-inch ductile iron pipeline excavation's been repaired. The operations people did a good job draining the south primary clarifier. We needed to drain that to get back in there to get field measurements in order to release the mechanical equipment to replace the clarifier. That was change order number 3, if you recall, to replace that. So after we had the approval, we drained it, did the field measurements. Now that's been released. There's a little glitch in the delivery of the disc filters. They're pushed back till probably January sometime. We're trying to speed that up as much as possible. It's a manufacturing issue. We're trying to see if they can send us one disc filter at a time, anything, so we can keep going with the installation. We're going to have everything complete, the foundations, the piping, the electrical, as much as possible. And once the disc filters are on site, we'll install them and make the connections. In the next week or so, we'll be starting to work on the solids handling building roofing. I met with the roofing contractor yesterday. We went over all the installation details. They're going to start mobilizing next week, bringing all the ISO installation, all the roof frame materials on site. And we have the PCO list I sent or handed out in the beginning here. I think you have it in front of you. There's 2 new PCOs on the list. One of them is for the UV channel, the effluent weirs. We're covering those with a solid decking material. And if you recall, we discussed one of the former PCOs not removing the grout from the north secondary clarifier. We're taking that credit and applying it to pay for essentially covering these UV channels. There's problematic algae growths in the channels. Operations has asked us to cover it. We're putting a covering on it, a solid decking that'll help, save on manpower and cleaning time on the UV channel. Now, something new just came up when we started going into the RAS building, looking at the replacement of the pumps. There was no design for vibration or isolation couplings on the RAS pumps. We're going to have to pick that up, and we're going to have to take care of it. It's just a standard installation detail that wasn't on the design drawings. They're in the specifications. We're getting a price from Worth to do that work right now, but it's roughly going to be around $11,000. So we just found out about this the other day. We're getting the pricing together. Once I have the pricing, I'll bring it back to the commission. My hope is that we have some other outstanding PCOs, but we haven't been credited back yet, but there's enough credits left in the contract to pay for that $11,000 in work. I recommend that we install the vibration couplings. Every pump that I ever put in on a project has had that kind of coupling. I have photos here of the existing pumps that have the couplings there. Now, why it wasn't part of the design, I'm not sure. I'll reach out to AECOM tomorrow. The only thing is, if it was picked up in the design, we may have got a better pricing for it. Who knows what would have happened, or we could have paid more for it in the bid. Either way, we have to pay for it. So I'm recommending we move forward with that. As I get more information, I'll make it available to the commission. So those PCOs are added on the bottom of the sheet. I don't have the pricing for them yet. Here's the photo of the existing installation. It shows the vibration couplings that weren't included in the contract. They're the rubber grommets between the pump on each side, the discharge and the suction line. I also have a photo of the bypass pump for the RAS. It's 1.2 million gallons a day. We'll be bypass pumping for the next 2 months. just to keep the plant in operation to allow us to rebuild the grass pumps. I have some other photos too I can pass around just so everybody can see the work we've been doing on site. We have two payments in for application processing and payment. Payment number 7 and payment number 8. Payment number 7 was approved. We talked about it at the last commission meeting. For some reason, it didn't make it through for payment. So they're both on the agenda tonight, payment 7 and payment number 8. They're both fair and appropriate, been agreed to with the contractor and signed off by myself and ACOM. That's all I have for the update on the project, commissioners. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Guess that's it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
That's it for me, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Fair.
I wanted to know how the UEZ meeting went. The board
UEZ meeting, you know what, I do have a report from them.
Mhm.
They just sent it, and I left it at home. The UEZ meeting was 2 Thursdays ago, I believe, and there was a communication problem. Usually they email me back. I was prepared to go to it. I never got an answer that it was still on. And at 8:30 in the morning, the young lady is calling me and saying that there was a meeting, so I didn't get to it. But I do have the information from that meeting, and I did forget. I'll have it for the meeting tonight so
Great.
that everyone can see it.
Thank you. The other thing is the best practice. Marcy's going to email everybody the best practice checklist if you have any questions. If you'd like to talk about it, if you can add that to the next work session meeting. And then that way we can vote on it at the next commission meeting because it's due in October. So that's with that. And we have to do that because then we get state funding based on that. So it's an important document. The budgets are due Friday of this week. So there's been a few departments that have turned them in, but quite a few departments have not. So that needs to be done. And then the budget's very important. There's going to be a lot of transfers occurring this year, which make the finance department and me especially uncomfortable. And I know in a perfect world the budget would be perfect, and that's not possible. But it seemed like there were extra ones this year. So take that into account when you're doing your budget, because there is a slight fear we might be running out of some money in certain accounts this year. Commissioner Sui did his department, correct?
Still have IT left to do and a little bit of streets and roads.
Okay.
I should have got inputted today.
And I believe most of finance is in. I know that the tax office sent theirs in. So they're.
One thing that we did try to do is eliminate some of the accounts, so that because it's pretty hard to tell what's going to break where. And
That's probably a good idea for. Well, I guess we
not
can
very
do that
many,
when we
one or
meet.
two, not many. But
Yeah, but if we can, I guess that would be smart in all the departments to make it easier. Also, bookkeeping wise, that would be easier too, right, Marcy? So that was those two things. And then, Brock, it came to my attention, there's a nice little loophole in the vacant property registration. So when we're finding these vacant properties that have been vacant for a long period of time, the new trick of the trade is they come in and they get a permit, but then they're not doing the work. So is there anything we can do to tighten up?
Well, the only problem is that a construction permit has a expiration period. So
But
you
can
don't
they
have to- you don't have to begin work. I think it's a year. And so, that's the
It's
problem.
Is there anything that we can do? Because some of these properties have sat vacant for 2 years, so they're just trying to get out of paying the $500 fee that's imposed now. And I don't know what the intention is to work, and it's been a problem property, and I don't even know if they're rehabable. I don't know what they're pulling the permits on. So I don't know if there's anything we do, I guess just straight code enforcement then, or is there a way to tighten up the ordinance?
I think it may be that they have to start construction within a certain period of time. But I don't think you can change the law. It is what it is, and it's the law.
I thought there wasn't
Construction code.
a real law, though, with the vacant property registration. I thought that was a gray area.
No, I think you can, it's gray to the extent that, someone might challenge it and claim that there's not explicit authorization for it in the statute. But I think there is statutory authorization. It's just general. It's not specific. specific.
Okay, so can you look at that and see if there's a way we can tighten it up a little bit?
I think I did, and I think my conclusion was the problem is that if you pull a permit, you have a certain period of time under construction code law to complete construction.
All right, so there's nothing we can
So I think
do.
what you do has to be, I mean, if they don't comply with the construction law, and the construction official could tell you whether or not they are, then I think that they're not in compliance with the ordinance.
All right, so I have to see from the construction official about the renewals and those types of things for the
That's what I think,
permits.
yeah.
Because it's a problem. I mean, these properties are sitting there, so they're beating the system again. It's just very frustrating to me. It's not fair. You're not helping me.
Well, if they don't follow if they're not acting in good faith, when that permit expiration date comes, then they could be issued a summons at that point.
Right, I guess that if it's for a year and they can renew it every year, you know, I mean, I don't.
No, I think they have to do work within
Okay.
a certain period of time.
Okay. So then the goal would be to work with the construction department, have a list, and then they're gonna have to go
Yeah.
out and inspect and keep track of the permits.
That's right.
Okay. That's all progress.
Coming back to the UEZ, there was one thing that was brought up about our bill that we haven't paid. So, Marcia, are you aware of that
No,
with UEZ?
It's not a bill, is it?
there was no bill.
No bill?
The goal was that they would let NILSA come down
Right.
a couple
Remember you
days a
said that.
month, and then we would work out an agreement of what that would cost.
But prior to that,
They did no work for
They
us.
did no
Okay.
work. It's not
All
a
right.
bill, Mike. It's
all right,
kind of a bad term they
it
probably
came
use
back
for
to
you.
me as a bill.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny because in the meeting we discussed that and it wasn't a problem.
Well, it was
They
brought
would-
back to me.
Of course, of course. And I offered to come to the board meeting and explain, and I wasn't allowed to come to the board. I was not invited to come to the board meeting. But the goal was we offered to work out a financial deal based on when Nilsa would come here. And Nilsa admitted she only does anything for Millville if someone happens to call.
Right.
And then they have to go to Violent City Hall, which seems ridiculous. They would be coming to Millville and
Brock,
doing
it-
a service then for Millville
Correct.
citizens.
Isn't the UEZ
Yeah.
board a public entity?
I think so.
So why couldn't anybody go to the board meeting?
I think anybody could.
So there's got to be an open public meeting if they're a public entity.
It's held upstairs, City Hall, Vineland.
Was it advertised? Why don't you see if it was advertised?
Even
It was
if three of
September
you want,
7th.
You could go.
Yes.
Okay.
We should.
Because I
we
offered
should
to
check
go
into that.
and different things, and it was just, I knew I was not,
Allowed to go.
I guess I was allowed to go. I was not welcomed to go.
We're not welcome.
The other question I have, Brock, on the SPCA contract, any movement on that?
I'm working on that. I don't have it done, and I am working on it.
Got it. Okay.
I
Thank
did
you.
want to talk to Sherry
And I-
Nay, but I understand that's not something that's going to happen because
No.
she's out.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I know that she was worried about that we were paying the bills for dogs that had owners. So if something, like if they bit someone when they were put down, the city was getting billed, whereas the owner should be getting billed. So I know that was one of her concerns.
That's a flaw from the SPCA that we spoke about.
But she caught that, so she needs to have
Right.
credit. I mean, the finance department caught that, otherwise so she did a good
job.
Yes.
Right, so I want credit due for that,
Oh,
for her, yeah.
She did a wonderful
And there were a couple other things she thought were out of order with the billing, that there were
Right, we
owners.
straightened out the part about the vet bills.
That
That's
was
working
where
fine
the
now.
vet was giving us a discount, and they were applying it back to our bill.
Okay,
Right, we're paying the
Brock-
vet
Brock's aware
directly
of
now.
that.
Well, then maybe I can work with you to get the
Sure,
contract
that's why I wanted
because
to
you're
mention-
knowledgeable about it, because I wasn't at the meeting.
Yeah, I wanted to leave it that because Sherry's not here, we can't move forward.
Okay.
You know, I could try to
No.
help you.
Very
Thank
well.
you, Marcy. All right, we now reach the public portion part of this meeting. Anyone that would like to address the commission, please go to the podium, state your name, and address your concerns, and please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Seeing no one, I close the public comment portion of this meeting. Comments of commissioners. Commissioner Davis.
Not at this time.
Sui.
Not at this time.
Commissioner Perkin Perry.
progress.
Myself, Progress. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.